Welcome, welcome everyone, and good day to you, no matter where you are in the world. Lovely to be practicing together with you. And how's the sound? Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, all right. Beautiful. So, as usual for Tuesday night, we will begin with a guided meditation for about 25 or 30 minutes. And what I'd like to do this evening is to do an abbreviated version of the six sense basis. So, this is a meditation that is intended to both help you to tune into your body, but also begin to observe the mind. So you can just begin by sensing the body sitting on your seat, or lying down or standing up, whichever posture you happen to be in. Just allowing the weight of the body to settle. Releasing the belly and relaxing around the hips as best you can. Allowing the bones of the spine to line up. All the way up through the neck. And the head gently resting on top of the spine. Softening the eyes. And now shifting the attention to the sensation of touch in the hands. Just attending to receiving sensations of touch coming from the hand. Staying curious about those sensations of touch. Maybe just observing how they shift. Staying attentive to the sensations of touch in the hand. Just receiving them from moment to moment.
Hello, Woody, had some. Okay, now it's working.
And now shifting the attention to attend to the sensations of sound, of hearing. Just receiving sensations of sound. Attending to the sensations of sound. Noticing how they shift, coming and going. Staying curious about the sensations of hearing. Just receiving them. And one last shift, turning the attention to the sensations in the mind. Mind is not constrained by the body. So the sensations might be thoughts or other perceptions. So just turning to receive them, to observe mental activity as sensations, just like a sound or a touch. Staying curious about mental activity as sensations that's arising and passing away. Okay. Okay, that was our meditation practice for this evening. And as usual, I can take some comments or questions about that afterward if folks have anything they want to share. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and transition into the Dhamma talk. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. We're just a few days away from New Year's Eve. And I was thinking about this being a time of year where maybe some folks are wishing each other a happy new year in 2023 or a prosperous new year. There's some song about that, if I recall correctly. Anyway, this is the time for New Year's wishes, New Year's intentions. And so I was thinking about what Buddhism might have to say about such a thing. There are always lots of teachings around this time of year about New Year's and about how to approach it. And so the framework that I want to talk about a little bit today are the teachings that come to mind that seem appropriate to this time of year. From my perspective, are the teachings of the Mahamangala Sutta, or the Sutta of the highest blessings, or the greatest blessings, or the greatest prosperity, the greatest fortune. And it's a very, very popular sutta to be chanted as a blessing or as a protection in across the countries in which early Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism is dominant. So places like Thailand and Sri Lanka, Laos, Cambodia. And so I brought the sutta to share and talk through some of the teachings that are here. And there are 10 verses, so we'll see if we get through all of them. And this is a sutta from, it appears in two places actually. It appears in the Sutta Nipada, is the place that you are most likely to find it, Sutta Nipada 2.4. And I have here a couple of translations, one from Bhante Sujata and one from Amaravati and Bayagiri. So they were the folks who did these translations into English and that were then compiled into the Aloka Vihara chant book. And my gratitude to the ayahs from Aloka Vihara who have given me permission to continue using these chants the way that I learned them there. And so the Sutta of the highest blessings. It begins, the backstory is, it begins with it as a conversation between Shakyamuni Buddha and a celestial being. So y'all can decide what you think about that, what you think about celestial beings, angels or devas or deities or whatever other ways of being you might think about. But that's the backstory here, is that the Buddha was at Jeta's Grove, which was purchased by Anathapindika, a very wealthy lay person who gave it to the Buddha as a place for a monastery. And late one night, this very shiny being showed up and asked him this question. This being showed up and said, many celestial beings and humans, so Bhante Sujata uses this word gods, and Amaravati and Abhayagiri decided not to translate the word devas at all and just leave it as devas. Not divas, mind you. Not Beyonce, but devas. Many celestial beings and humans have thought about blessings and desire well-being and happiness. So please tell me what are the highest blessings. Declare the highest blessings. So I'm very loosely working with this translation here by Bhante Sujata. And then the Buddha responds with these 10 verses about what he thinks are the things that we could appreciate about our lives, or that we might actually aspire to in our lives. And so he begins, first of all, with this admonition: do not hang around with fools, but hang around instead with folks who are wise. Avoid those of foolish ways and associate with the wise. And this is a very interesting place to begin. And to me, it has echoes, it kind of rings throughout many of the early Buddhist teachings, because the Buddha had this understanding that we are influenced by the people around us. That's why he said that Sangha, community, was so important. We are definitely influenced in various ways by the people that we are in regular contact with. Not that we have to become like them by any stretch, but that kind of, we do tend to influence each other's thinking. And so it'd be better to be hanging around with people who are wise than people who are foolish. And I'll get into a little bit more about what we might mean by foolish or wise in a minute. But just to say, when I first started hearing this sutta, it was after many, many years of Mahayana practice. And I thought to myself, no, that's not right. You have to hang out with the foolish people, because otherwise how would the foolish people ever become the wise people? So I think a little bit of that is also true. I think that that we'll see later on in the sutta that there's an admonition about respect, about learning how to respect other beings. So I think the idea is more like, don't be careful not to fall into the wrong crowd. Don't fall over to the dark side. And when Ajahn Brahm was giving a talk about this sutta, he told a little story about a person who approved their various construction projects there at the monastery there in Perth, Australia. And he said, the guy came up to him one day, this gentleman, and said, you know, when things get really rough at my work, what I do is I get in my car and I come and I park in your parking lot and I just hang out there for like 30 minutes because that's as close as I can get to hanging out with y'all. But I feel better when I do that. So thank you for your car park, he said to Ajahn Brahm. Thanks for your car park. And so I think it's an interesting thing for us to examine the effect that various people have on us and how we're working with that, how we're practicing with that. And then the next line is honoring those worthy of honor. So who would be the folks worthy of honor? Well, according to the Buddha, it would be people practicing Sila Samadhi Panya. It would be the people practicing a high degree of ethics and clarifying the mind and practicing wisdom. So why is that a blessing to you, to honor people who are worthy of honor? Well, for one, it's a reminder to you that those people are in your lives. And this, I think, in modern times is a very important thing, actually. You know, it's kind of the opposite of always thinking, oh, it's a dog-eat-dog world, or like, you know, there aren't any good people around anymore. I sometimes hear people say things like this. And I think, well, actually, you know, there are folks, I think, who are upholding some positive values that are worth remembering, are worth paying attention to. And so he goes on, he says, living in a suitable place, having made merit in the past. So this starts to go into karma a little bit, understanding that, that what you're experiencing in your life is in part a result of the choices that you've made in the past. And this is very true at a very kind of mundane, subjective level, right? The choices that you've made are part of the factors that make the experience that you're having arise. So remember that you have an influence on your life. That is a blessing to have, to be aware of that by the choices that you make. The choices that you make in terms of action, speech, and thoughts, all three. That's the teaching of Kamma, that all of those aspects matter. So Kamma, the word itself just means simply action. It means literally action, but thoughts are considered to be in Buddhism a kind of action, and speech is also considered to be a kind of action. And then you have sort of physical embodied actions in addition. And then there's this line, being rightly resolved in oneself, or let's see how they translate it over here, guided by the rightful way. I think that's a little bit idealized form of translating this line. But being rightly resolved in oneself. It means to have made, again, working with one's own karma, to have made a resolution to do your best to do your best to live an upright life, to do your best to live a wise, compassionate life, to really set your mind on the end of ignorance or on the end of suffering or on the highest level of ethics that you can actually do. And then moving on, he says, education and a craft, discipline and training, and well-spoken speech. These are all high blessings. Very beautiful, right? Appreciating our education, no matter what degree of education we have. One of the things that has been very sad to see for me recently is the situation for women in Afghanistan. As part of my work with on the board of Buddhist Global Relief, we had approved a project for helping to fund the university schooling of some women, young women in Afghanistan. And the Taliban had basically prohibited girls from going to school between the 6th grade and the 12th grade, but they were letting the women who were in college continue until just this last week. And they made an announcement, I think it was yesterday or the day before. Anyway, recently they made an announcement and prohibiting, it was last week, they made an announcement prohibiting women from attending university. And then yesterday they made an announcement saying even NGO workers, non-governmental organizations, nonprofit workers who are domestic or international folks, women could not work in the country of Afghanistan. So it's really kind of doubling down on a very harmful view, a very, very harmful view. So we really, I think, can be thankful for our education as a blessing. And whatever training or craft we might have learned, and then this word discipline, having some discipline in our lives, being grateful that we know the value of even small amounts of discipline in your life, or maybe a lot of discipline, not too far, not harming yourself with discipline, but sometimes knowing our limits can be a blessing, can be a good thing. And well-spoken speech, so that there are some very clear, many clear teachings about this. This is one of the key aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path, is right speech that is kind, truthful, beneficial, spoken in goodwill. And actually, it said that the highest kind of speech, the most beneficial, the highest blessing in terms of speaking to someone would be to share the Dhamma with them. To share the Dhamma with them. Even just as a role model, saying things in a way that is beneficial, that follows those rules, that is truthful. That is a blessing to yourself as well as to others. Right? It helps really create a sense of care and safety, I think. And sometimes we have explicit permission to share the Dhamma more specifically, so I'm grateful for that. I'm asked to share the Dhamma. I think of my master, my Zen master who ordained me, Sekihara Roshi. There's a story about timely speech that, that was the 5th. Kind, truthful, beneficial, spoken in goodwill, and timely. Sometimes it's listed as 4 in the suttas, and sometimes it's listed as 5 qualities. But anyway, it was a question, a moment of timely speech. Some of you have heard me share this story before. Harada Roshi was dying. He had a massive heart attack, the second one in a week. His first one was misdiagnosed as a backache, actually. And then he had the second heart attack. And it was during the May Sesshin. During the May Sesshin 2008. And so they took him to the regional hospital because the little local hospital there in Obama, this tiny little town where our monastery was not prepared to handle what he needed in terms of cardiac care. And the doctors there thought that he was going to die soon. And so they let us know there at the monastery. And so we were about 21 people, 21 students or so living there at the monastery. And so they said, okay, we're all going to go in groups of 3 and have a chance to say our goodbyes to Roshi. We can't all show up at once. So we're going to drive out there. It's like an hour and 15-minute drive or something out to the hospital in groups of 3. And so I was going out there and I was thinking about what would I say to him if this was the last thing I could possibly say to him. And I was reminded of a moment when we were in practice discussion. We were in what's called Dokusan in Japanese, a one-on-one practice discussion with in my case, with an interpreter. And it was the first time that he'd said something to me in Japanese that I understood, that he said something to me there in practice discussion that I understood. And I don't even remember what the question was that he said this in response to, but he said, Watashi to anata wa futatsu denai. And that means you and I are not 2 things. Literally 2 objects. Futatsu is the word. So in Japanese, there's a different word for 2 people than 2 objects. But futatsu is the name for 2 objects. And he said, you and I are not 2 things. And so when I got there to the hospital, I sat down next to him and I held his hand, sat next to his bed and I held his hand. And he held my hand really hard. And I leaned over and I said, mind you, that was the first time I'd ever touched him. In 2 years of practice, I'd never touched him up until that point. And I leaned over and I said to him, because it's in a hospital, there's all kinds of machines going on and there are all kinds of people around us. And it's not even a private room. It's like a little section in the intensive care unit. And I said, Watashi to anata wa futatsu denai. You and I are not 2. And what did Roshi say in response to that? He said, arigato, 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 arigato. He said, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And he just went on saying thank you for the whole rest of my stay. Like another 10 minutes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And Roshi didn't die that time. Roshi didn't die for many years, actually. So we did have some other chances to talk. But it was a really important moment. It was a pivotal moment. It was a time when I realized, actually, no matter what our roles were, that the importance of speech was right there for us. It was very present. It was very high. That was a very critical moment. So going on then, the Buddha says, care. So this is translated as caring, been translated by Bhante Sujato, caring for mother and father, kindness to children and partners. And it's upatanang. It's this Pali word which means It could mean many things. It could mean like actually serving someone. It can mean taking care of them in the kind of literal sense, like we take care of, small children or elderly folks. It can mean also like something like staying close. It can also mean worshiping. I don't think it means that in this case. But something like having care for your parents, the people who brought you into this world, literally, biologically, perhaps, some care for them, but certainly care for whoever it is that you perceive to be the person who helped you grow up. And for many people, that's not their biological parents, it's other folks. But some appreciation for the kindness that helped you to become who you are as an adult, and kindness to kids and partners. The Buddha was very, very clear about that. Many times he spoke about one's responsibility, taking care of their kids. And then unstressful work, that's a big blessing. According to the Buddha, that's one of the highest blessings. Unstressful work. So that's very, very true, I think. Sometimes we tolerate very stressful situations at work for hopefully short periods of time or for longer periods of time, but it takes its toll. I think we need to be, I think that is something actually that in at least American society and perhaps in other societies, it's really something that's up for people. What is a sustainable kind of work? A sustainable level of work, a sustainable way of working together. And then he goes on, giving and dhammacharya. So this is often translated, this is translated here by Bhante Sujata as righteous conduct, and the Maravati and Abhayagiri folks translate it as a righteous life. But I think that sounds really heavy-handed. Dhammacharya means acting according to the Dhamma. Acting according to the Dhamma, acting according to your best understanding of truth or reality or the principles of the way things actually work. And then again, kindness to your relatives, blameless deeds, blameless anavajani. This is something, it has a feeling, this blamelessness is something that you see this phrase used a lot in the early suttas. And I think it means something like staying out of trouble, like staying out of trouble with the law, literally. Like somebody could not blame you for being the person who smashed the window and stole the cell phone out of the store, like that. So blameless deeds. Again, a kind of harmlessness. Abstaining from evil, and then restraint or self-control around intoxicants. There's intoxicating drinks in particular, like alcohol. Restraint or self-control, sometimes is translated here as avoiding. So, interestingly, it's not the word. There is a word for one who completely abstains, and that's not the word that's here. It's something about self-control, having the ability to, again, know not to become intoxicated to the point where it causes heedlessness. That's what's usually the kind of guideline that's given. And then we get into the Dhamma practice. So respect and humility, these two go together, respect and humility. It means not only respect for oneself, but also respect for all beings. Respect for the value of a being, of a life. And humility. right? Humility to know that that we are all in this together, so to speak, and staying away from arrogance, not using your practice to build up your arrogance or your sense of ego. That's a very important thing. Unfortunately, something that happens very frequently. But actually, that's usually, I would say, a sign of immaturity in practice. Folks who are mature in the practice know better that that the more you understand that the path is a path of discovery, not a path of attainments, but a path of letting go and discovering what's actually true, then arrogance doesn't arise so much. So respect and humility, contentment and gratitude also two that go together, generally speaking, to the extent that we're grateful for what we have, for what we are, for who we know, for the love that we have in our lives, or anything beneficial we have in our lives, or avoiding things that are not beneficial, that are harmful, that are evil. All of those things, we can have gratitude for so many things, and that helps us to lead. That helps us to have some contentment, some setting down some of the grasping and wanting. And then timely listening to the Dhamma. Very, very important, listening to the Dhamma. And so notice that humility and respect comes before listening to the Dhamma. So that's important too, right? You can't learn anything if you think you already know it all. There's a very famous Zen story where the student comes and sits down in front of the Zen master, and the Zen master says, well, let's have some tea, let's have some tea before we talk any further. And so he puts down a cup in front of himself and his cup in front of the student, and he starts to pour the tea for the student, and he keeps pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring until the cup is full, and the cup is even overflowing, and the student's like, stop, what are you doing? And he says, if your cup is already full, it's very hard to put any more in. So that was his lesson. That was his first lesson to that new student. So then patience, very important, khanti. So we start to see also the practice of the paramis or the paramitas is starting to come in here, right? So patience, khanti or kshanti in Sanskrit is one of the paramis or the paramitas, the so-called, sometimes translated as perfections, or you could say the pinnacle, the very highest qualities that help us on the path. Being easy to admonish, right? So being willing to listen about mistakes. When you're making mistakes, we all make mistakes, and learning to be able to listen when our mistakes are pointed out. That is very, very important. Right. Again, without that, your cup is already full. Without that, it's very, very easy to go and get very off base or very confused. So you need to be able to listen. And this is, particularly for monastics, this is upheld as a very, very important quality, because we know that if you're going to live in community, you have to be able to listen to other people's feedback. And I think this is also true in our relationships, any kind of relationships that we're in with our families, our partners, our roommates, whoever it might be. And then seeing seekers, again, sort of being inspired by folks who are on the spiritual path of some sort or another. It's not necessary, so it doesn't say bhikkhunis or bhikkhus necessarily, but folks who are on the spiritual path, sometimes that's a blessing, that's an inspiration. And timely discussion of the teaching. So having listened to the teaching and having seen people practicing the teaching, then discussing the teaching. right? So getting really engaged with it, so there's a receptive part, and then there's an engaged part. Or as Roshi used to say quite succinctly, he would say, listen, think, practice. Listen, think, practice. All right, so, and then we get into austerities and celibacy. So now he's getting into things that are more in terms of the monastic path, this kind of austerity and celibacy, although many people who are not monastics are practicing that. And some people who are monastics are not practicing that. So we should know that there's all sorts of ways of relating to that. But one way to think about austerity and celibacy, if you're not inclined to practice that way, is to think about it in terms of just, again, a sort of a degree of self-restraint, a degree of just being reasonable about your activities. You know, I think of like the Marie, what's her name? Marie Kono? The lady with the like very simplistic, like having everybody keep things tidy and not buy too many things. Like that kind of sensibility. And then what? Seeing the noble truths. Okay, now we've made a big leap. Now we've made a very big leap, right? So going from listening to the teaching, seeing people practicing the teaching, discussing the teaching, then practicing this kind of simplicity of life, direct life, and directly seeing the noble truths. Directly seeing the truth of the presence of dukkha in our lives, being willing to acknowledge that, being willing to turn to face dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, or suffering in our lives, and have a look at it and try to understand it. That very simple step is critical, right? It's said to be one of the key steps of right view, is to be able to begin by acknowledging that there is dukkha in one's life. And actually, that's one of the things that brings people to the path quite often, right? That some big painful thing or some difficulty happens, or you find some way that you're overwhelmed by the difficulty of your life, and you find out you don't have other ways to cope with it, and it brings you to the Dhamma. You say, right, the Dhamma speaks to this. The Dhamma is clear about this. It speaks to my lived experience of this reality. So seeing the noble truths, and also then the next step is, the next line in the sutta is realizing Nibbana. Right? So we've made a huge leap then again, right, to the full culmination of the path. Nibbana Satchakirya. Satchakirya means what? So Satcha is truth, like the noble truth, or Satcha, Chatura Satcha. And Kirya means to do. So this word that's being translated as realization, this compound, means to do truth. To do truth, or to do reality. So what is it to realize? Nibbana means that is synonymous with becoming an arahant or an arahanti if you're a woman. Arahanta, if it's plural, we're talking about men and women. There's all sorts of versions of that word. But to realize that which is a peace beyond any kind of peace that you can imagine. to realize that which is completely beyond the conditioned world. So to have the realization of Nibbana, that is the highest blessing. And then, interestingly, it turns all the way back around, and then I'm going to finish my comments here so we can go to comments and questions by you. Then it goes all the way back around and says, because now it's talking about, well, what's it like having gone through, having had all of these blessings in one's life and having done these things, right? Having lived the ethical life, having been influenced by people who are wise, having taken care of one's social responsibilities, one's responsibility to oneself, being grateful, all of these various practices, listening to the Dhamma, seeing people practice the Dhamma, discussing the Dhamma, and then practicing the Dhamma yourself, making those choices in your life, and then this realization, and then he says this verse about what it's like. Though touched by worldly things, their mind does not tremble. Nakampati, does not tremble, does not shake. So though touched by worldly things, you're not off in some other formless, unbodied, ghostly plane of existence. You're right here in a body and mind. And yet there is this incredible stillness, steadiness of mind that is right here in the midst of the full activity of a human life. So a profound, profound kind of equanimity. Beyond sorrow, beyond stain, secure. This is the highest blessing. So I share this with you as a way of saying that this path is right here for you right now. Whether you think that you can experience Nibbana or not, all these various aspects that have been referred to as the highest blessings, these can be things in your life next year, right now. So I wish you many, many blessings.